This is the CELTFATHER Marc Gunn, and I am here with Grinning Beggar himself, Phil Duckworth, with this is the Grinning Beggar's Paddy Rock podcast and radio show.
What it is, it's basically what you do, but it's got a Celtic Punk and Celtic rock flair to it, where I guess probably you're a little bit more rock and traditional. So we take the music up a notch and take the unsuspecting listener and give them a boot right in the crotch.
And it's at paddyrock.com, is that right?
Paddyrock.com, yes, sir.
Awesome. So what I want to figure out, okay, so I don't know when we first met online. It was probably the beginning of the Irish and Celtic Music Podcast at the very least. Maybe the beginning of the Celtic Music Magazine. Is that about right?
It could have been very easily, because you only had a couple albums out with as a Brobdingnagian.
Brobdingnagian Bards, you mean?
That's it.
Well, I love that. I love hearing how people pronounce or mispronounce the band name. So what I'm curious about, though, is, first off, is how you got started with Celtic music.
Well, I guess if we take it right back to the roots, when I was a little kid, my pop used to listen to these LPs. There were 2 LPs in a pack, and it was Scottish Highland pipes. And he always used to give me hell. He said, "Don't touch my stereo." And every time he'd leave the house, I'd put these bagpipe musics on and drive my mom insane with them. And as life progressed, so I, went through the steps as any teenager does, but I ended up falling in love with Great Big Sea because where I grew up at in Windsor, Ontario, Canada, they used to come play a festival every year, International Freedom Festival. And at the time, they were actually just teenagers. They would play it for, wow. I think they play it for free,
Yeah.
They would just come, throw down some music, and everybody would have a party, and that was it. And from there, it just blossomed,
Yeah.
By the time I was in my 20s, I was discovering the Shite and Onions compilations and all the fantastic music that there was to be found, including bands like the Tossers.
So when did you start your podcast, which was originally the Grinning Beggar Celtic Music Podcast? Is that right?
Now you're going to catch me with my kills up. Well, I guess I've been doing Paddy Rock now for, I think, six years.
Has it been 6 years? Is that when you took it over? It seems like it's just yesterday.
I don't think I had kids yet.
That's always a good place to start. So you picked up Paddy Rock Radio, and you how did you get a hold of that?
Well, where I was hosting my site, it was an agreement that kind of went awry. And I was left without my website, but I was still hosting it on a podcast host. And the previous owner, John Bowles, DJ John, as most folks know him, he didn't know anything what was going on. He said, "Hey, man, would you be interested in hosting your show on Paddy Rock?" I said, and again, he had no idea what was going on. I said, "I would love to." He says, "Well, don't you want to think about it?" I said, "No." I says, "It's an awesome opportunity." I says, "You are part of the reason why I started doing a podcast. So, why not?" So my show ended up there in a few, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 months after I started hosting my show there. He came to me and he says, he goes, "I'm thinking about getting out of the game. If I were to give you Paddy Rock, would you keep running it?" And I said, "Well, yeah, are you really going to do this though? Because it's been here since like 2000.
Wow.
And he was like, "Yeah," he goes, "I'm done. It's yours."
Wow. That's awesome.
And that was it.
Yeah. Now it's a full on internet radio station, right?
What I do is I just do a couple of podcasts.
Okay.
I don't know what was there prior to me, and I don't know what's still out there.
Okay.
But I try to put out a few shows every month.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's primarily a podcast then, but you also do music reviews. Is that right? Because I know you do for me.
Yeah, they're hard to do though. I have a problem doing reviews because I'm not your standard music listener.
Oh yeah, how so?
Well, when I listen to something, it's like I got to feel it.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I listen to music. It's like if I have to feel the music, but trying to translate what I feel into words, it doesn't always mesh real easily.
Yeah, I can see that.
And that probably sounds weird to a lot of people, but that's just how it is. When I go to a show, everyone's dancing, having a good time, and I'm just standing there listening to the music because it's like I don't want to dance. I just want to feel it.
Really? Awesome. Okay. And now you've been listening to the music for a long time. You mentioned earlier that you were in college radio. Is that right?
Yeah, the University of Windsor. I actually did it was some sort of a work program through them, and I ended up being the assistant music director there for, I don't know, I think it was 6 or 12 months. And during that time, I started doing a radio show just to fill in, They said, oh, we need someone to fill in. You want to do a show? And 8 years later, I was still doing it. So
it's so funny to hear because back in when I was in college, I was attempting to get a radio slot, and I couldn't do it at the University of Texas at Austin. There was too much competition or something. I don't know what, but I couldn't do it. But you were able to get one, huh?
Oh yeah, I literally just stepped in it.
Wow. And what kind of music were you playing?
It was a lot of death metal, thrash metal, punk rock, hardcore.
Yeah.
Nothing like I listen to now.
Right.
No, that's not true. Nothing like I podcast now.
Right, yeah. That's kind of the way it is. I think all of us who are the podcasters, we have a different mixes. I play mostly, I listen to a lot of Irish and Celtic music podcasts, but that's not all that I listen to outside of my podcast world. So,
in fact, I still maintain my old Grinning Beggar Podomatic site.
Oh, do you really?
Yeah, so it's like whenever I get a bug, I want to do something off the cuff, I put it there.
Is there something different between those two, between the Paddy Rock show and the Grinning Beggar show?
Well, the Grinning Beggar has become just the counterculture podcast, so that's anything off the cuff.
Okay.
And Paddy Rock is Grinning Beggar's Paddy Rock is just Celtic music. Then there's now Paddy Rock Roots podcast, which is of course my. And some people are giving me guff because I like bluegrass, and they're like, that's not really punk rock. And I was like, who are you to tell me what to do?
Good for you.
So I said, just to do it properly, I spun it out into a whole new show.
Oh,
so
cool.
There's a lot of bluegrass and Americana and folk rock and folk punk, and it all kind of falls under the same umbrella,
Yeah. So how did you get the name Grinning Beggar?
It's because when I started doing this, I didn't have a pot I didn't have a pot, and but I was always smiling. I'd always go to shows and I'd talk to some of these bands that I liked, and they'd be like, "Man, you're always smiling. You're such a happy dude." And it's like, oh. So it just kind of manifested itself that way. I was a beggar because I didn't have any damn money, but I was always happy to be at the shows, listening to music. So
I think people can hear that in your voice as you're talking too. Nicely relaxed with your beer and some good Celtic music, huh?
Absolutely.
So what can our listeners expect on the podcast that you're putting out? I guess it's going to be on Thursday.
Well, it's a pretty diverse selection, and it's a lot of new stuff that I've gotten that I haven't even played yet on my own show. Mm-hmm. And it's like a global selection, so it's going to be pretty fun. There's the Poor Men. There's some good buddies of mine from New Bedford, Massachusetts. Then you go to the other side of the country with the California Celts. SMZB are from China. Yeah,
oh, wow.
Celtic
Nice.
Punk from China.
Awesome.
There's brand new tune from the Handsome Young Strangers, who are from Australia. Hoist of Colors are on there. They're another band from California. They got a pretty good scene out there right now. The Peelers, who are from my very own homeland, Canada. It's been 12 years since they've put out a new album, and this new one that they just put out, what is it, Palace of the Fiend. Fantastic album, probably one of my most favorite of the year so far. And a triple shot for in for a penny. There's some fellas out of Savannah, Georgia area. Not a lot of Celtic punk in Savannah, Georgia, but these guys do it pretty well.
So, what is it about Celtic punk that really drives you?
It's probably, I like traditional stuff, but I like it with a kick in the pants. And I grew up listening to a lot of punk and a lot of thrash metal, so I've always liked a little bit more aggressive music, and that kind of fits the bill for me. It kind of has the same overtones. There's a lot of history. There's a lot of blue collar, a lot of drinking songs, but it's just got a little bit more of an aggressive tone to it, and it sits well with me.
That's awesome. Where can people find you online, and how can they get to hear your Paddy Rock podcast?
Well, they can go to paddyrock.com, which is I guess the easiest because you can download it or stream it right from the site.
Mm-hmm.
Then of course you can get it up on iTunes, and there's Stitcher, which is a very cool app for your phone if you don't have it. And just recently, my podcast has been accepted to the Google Play Store. So if you do the Google Play Music thing, you can find the podcast there as well. And I need to thank you for that because I saw yours was there. I was like, I should try this.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite festival or a scene that really drives your blood?
For the last few years, I've become a big fan of the Get Shamrock Festival out in California.
Uh-huh.
It's Murrieta, California, every September.
Okay.
In probably for the last 3 years or so, I work with the fella Paul. He's the one that runs it, and I kind of help him line up some talent for the festival. So he gets what he likes and who he likes, and he'll have whatever left over. He'll be like, "So who do you think would do well here with what I got?" And I look at it and I go, and then I send him a list of what I think. And he goes, I like this, and I like this, and I like this. What can we do? So I'll try to connect the dots for him, and we end up normally with a pretty good festival. And this year we got some really good guys coming out from the East Coast. They're going to have the Fighting Jamesons there again this year.
Nice.
And Mickey Rickshaw from Boston, and 1916 from Rochester, New York.
Awesome.
Yeah, so that'll be a good festival, and they get some their usual West Coast talent out there, which is not in short supply by any means.
Definitely. Very cool. Well, Phil, thank you so much for joining me, and I'm looking forward to sharing your podcast over on the Irish and Celtic Music Podcast page over at CelticMusicPodcast.com. If you want to find out more about Phil and the Grinning Beggars Paddy Rock radio and podcast and all of the punk rock, Celtic punk rock stuff, then head on over to paddyrock.com. Thank you so much again, and we'll talk later. All right?
Cheers, Mark. Thank you very much.
All right. Sláinte. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can support my music and travels for as little as $1 per month when you join the Gunrunner Club and become a patron of my music. And, of course, you can subscribe to the podcast and my mailing list at CELTFATHER.com.